Around the 1860s, near the time of the Industrial Revolution, American architecture was comprised of many imported European styles. Lloyd Wright, an American architect, was willing to think outside the box and created a turning point in how buildings were made with his new, unique designs. He believed that architecture was not just about buildings, but about nourishing the lives of the people in them. With this belief, he designed and created structures unlike anything anyone had seen before, changing the course of architecture and inspiring society to go forth and create.
In the 19th century, many American architects worked in the federal style, which can be seen as an Americanization of the classical architecture found in Europe and the colonies. It flourished from 1785 through 1820, and later in many government buildings. Typically, a federal-style house is a simple square or rectangular box, 2 or 3 stories high and 2 rooms deep. Most design elements are understated, and many of the columns and moldings are narrow and simple. The windows are never grouped, but are arranged individually in strict horizontal and vertical symmetry. The door of the house is usually the most decorated of the home's exterior. Around 1820 to 1850, a popular architectural style was the Greek Revival, which reflected the heavier taste of England and became what may be called the national style. Some of the best-known examples of the columned Greek temple style are southern plantation houses. Around 1850, Gothic and Tuscan were favorite styles. However, the financial panic of 1857 and the disruptions of the American Civil War brought an end to this building phase. During the 1860s, around the time Lloyd Wright was born, America was experiencing the Industrial Revolution. Products were moved from home businesses, where items were generally crafted by hand, to machine-aided production. The revolution involved major changes in transportation, manufacturing, and communications. Many new manufacturing technologies were brought from Britain to the United States. The concentration of industry in the Northeast also facilitated the development of new transportation systems, such as railroads and canals, encouraging people to trade and making a much wider variety of goods and materials available. The new technological innovation began to show itself in the 19th century with many new inventions and ideas, including Samuel Morse's telegraph and Elias Howe's sewing machine. American inventors such as Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison created a long list of technologies that improved many aspects of American life. This period, encompassing most of the second half of the 19th century, eventually became known as America's Industrial Revolution. Completing the first transcontinental railroad in 1869 was a major milestone, making it easier to transport people, materials, and products. The United States also had a vast human resources. Between 1860 and 1900, 14 million immigrants came to the country, providing many new workers for an array of industries.
What is architecture anyways? Is it the vast collections of the various buildings which have been built to please the varying tastes of the various lords of mankind? I think not. No, I know that architecture is life, or at least it is life itself taking form, and therefore is the truest record of life as it was lived in the world yesterday, as it is lived in the world today, or ever will be lived. So architecture, I know it to be a great spirit. Lloyd Wright. Born 2 years after the end of the American Civil War in Richland Center, Wisconsin, Lloyd Wright was witness to the extraordinary changes that swept the world because of the Industrial Revolution. Dismissing the many imported European styles most Americans favored, his goal was to create architecture that addressed the physical, social, and spiritual needs of the modern American citizen. Wright described his architecture as organic, and his anchor and muse was nature, which he spelled with a capital N, indicating not the outward aspect of it, but its spiritual dimension. He quotes,
"A genius is a man who has an eye to see nature. A genius is a man who has a heart to feel nature. And a genius is a man who has the courage to follow nature."
In today's society, we take architecture as an art form for granted. We marvel at the beauty of houses and structures and take pride in buildings in our towns and cities. Without Wright and his artistic vision, perhaps we could still see architecture as simply a way to house ourselves and serve our basic needs, completely for function, rather than something to delight and inspire us. Wright himself grew up close to the land and in touch with its creative processes, and it gave him constant inspiration for his architecture. He believed architecture must stand as a unified whole, grow from and be a blessing to the landscape, all parts relating and contributing to the final unity, whether furnishings, plantings, or works of art, through simplification of form, line, and color, and rhythmic play of parts, poise, and balance. Wright created fluid, coherent spaces that complement the changing physical and spiritual lives of the people who live in them. One structure that is slightly less well known is the Lindholm Service Station, located in Cloquet, Minnesota. It includes a copper triangular roof and a glassed-in waiting room that looks out over the riverfront. One might wonder why a simple gas station is so worthy of mention, but it has a much larger story behind it. The gas station was to be part of a planned community called Broadacre. Wright made many models of Broadacre, but this gas station is one of the only pieces ever built. Wright intended Broadacre to be a community where everyone could come together, a place with a home-like atmosphere. The gas station's glassed-in waiting room was meant to be a place for people to sit, talk, and interact with one another. Unfortunately, this part of his plan never worked out, as few people wanted to take the time to sit down and socialize. Wright passed away shortly after the station was completed. He never got to see the actual structure, and none of the rest of his plans for Broadacre were ever carried out. But the designing of the service station gives us insight into Wright's vision. He didn't just design a gas station as he was asked to do, he designed a place for community. So even though the Lindholm service station was the only part of Broadacre that was ever actually built, it shows that Frank Lloyd Wright was thinking for the future and thinking about architecture as more than just a way to serve the basic needs of humans.
In a 1908 article for the Architectural Record, Frank Lloyd Wright prophesied about his legacy. He says, "As for the future, the work shall grow more truly simple, more expressive with fewer lines, fewer forms, more articulate with less labor, more plastic, more fluent, although more coherent, more organic. It shall grow not only to fit more perfectly the methods and processes that are called upon to produce it, but shall further find whatever is lovely or of good repute in method or process, and idealize it with the cleanest, most virile stroke I can imagine. As understanding and appreciation of life matures and deepens, this work shall prophesy and idealize the character of the individual it is fashioned to serve more intimately, no matter how inexpensive the result must finally be. It shall become in its atmosphere as pure and elevating in its humble way as the trees and flowers are in their perfectly appointed way, for only so can architecture be worthy its high rank as a fine art." With many of these predictions, Wright was very correct. Because of the architectural revolution he created, architecture will never be the same. Wright had an especially large impact on prairie-style architecture because of the large amount he worked with it. Perhaps one of the best examples of this is Wright's Roby House. Because of his influence, many prairie-style houses today greatly resemble Wright's designs. Our society is home to many people with brilliant, creative minds, and sometimes all they need is the encouragement to begin creating, which we believe was what Frank Lloyd Wright provided. In 1991, the American Institute of Architects named Frank Lloyd Wright the greatest American architect of all time. An Architectural Record published a list of the 100 most important buildings of the previous century that included 12 Wright structures. Currently, Wright has structures in 37 U.S. states, as well as several in Canada, Egypt, England, and Japan, some of his most famous being the Roby House, Taliesin, and Falling Water. Minnesota currently holds 12 Wright structures. Though architecture has continued to change and evolve since Wright's death in 1959, his particular style is still widely accepted, and many new architects have built on it and added their own touches. Wright was so ahead of his time with his designs that they are still modern and fit the tastes of many. Wright's designs can be seen as the building blocks of modern architecture, and even as architecture continues to change to fit the needs of modern people, there is a good chance many components of Wright's designs will be included. While many people wanted the traditional imported European-style houses that were popular during his time, Frank Lloyd Wright wanted something unique and special, something to remember. He didn't design houses just to be lived in, but also to complement the nature around them and the people inside them, and to be a blessing to the landscape, with all parts contributing to the final unity. The international honors he received during his lifetime, the dozens of major exhibitions that have been mounted, and the multitude of books and articles that have been written about his life and work confirm Wright's important contribution to architectural history and the architectural profession. We look to this legacy and hope that we can find the same direction for our future.
That is my contribution to modern architecture.